Welcome to Shadow Frames, where forgotten images reveal their darkest secrets. The photograph that brings us together today appears at first glance to be nothing more than a charming holiday memento. Dated Christmas morning, 1909, the sepia-toned image shows a family gathered around a towering spruce in their Victorian parlor. The father stands proudly at the back, mustache precisely trimmed, his three-piece suit immaculate despite the early hour. Beside him, his wife's high-necked dress cascades to the floor, her hair swept up in the fashion of the Edwardian era. Three children sit cross-legged on the oriental carpet, two boys in matching sailor suits and a girl, perhaps 7 years old, in a white pinafore, her dark hair tied back with ribbon. Their faces glow with what appears to be Christmas joy, surrounded by an impressive array of wrapped presents. The larger gifts stand proudly displayed: a rocking horse with real horsehair mane, a dollhouse with miniature furniture visible through tiny windows, elaborately wrapped parcels with satin ribbons. The photograph captures that perfect moment of anticipation before the unwrapping begins. For over 100 years, this image passed through family albums, eventually finding its way to an estate sale and then to our digital age. When modern AI analysis was applied to enhance the fading photograph, something unexpected emerged from the technological restoration. The enhanced image revealed what truly lay beneath those pristine wrappings. The rocking horse's interior showed not the expected wooden framework, but a hollow cavity containing what appears to be preserved animal remains. Not horses, but something smaller, with distinct feline features. The dollhouse, when digitally examined through its windows, contained not miniature furniture, but tiny tableaus of disturbing scenes. Minuscule human figures arranged in positions of torment. Most chilling were the contents of the largest gift box on which the little girl rests her hand. The AI enhancement revealed a corner of the box had torn slightly, and peering through this tear was what appears to be a human finger. The algorithm's reconstruction suggests an adult-sized hand inside, the nail beds showing distinctive bluish discoloration consistent with oxygen deprivation. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the family's expressions. When enhanced and enlarged, their smiles take on a different quality, not the joy of Christmas morning, but something closer to knowing satisfaction. The father's hand resting on his wife's shoulder shows unusual dark staining beneath the fingernails that wasn't visible in the original faded image. The question becomes not just what these gifts contained, but who this family really was. County records from 1909 mention no unusual disappearances in the weeks before Christmas, yet the photograph suggests otherwise. Even more disturbing, the family name associated with the photograph doesn't appear in any census records from the time. Who were these people with their macabre Christmas offerings? What happened to them after this photograph was taken? And perhaps most importantly, who was meant to receive these grotesque gifts that Christmas morning over a century ago? Our research team traced the photograph's provenance to a small township in New England that no longer appears on modern maps. The settlement of Millerton existed officially from 1893 to 1911, when county boundaries were redrawn, following what local newspapers delicately referred to as the incident. Archive retrieval revealed Millerton had experienced a peculiar pattern of animal disappearances in autumn of 1909, first neighborhood cats, then larger livestock. The town council minutes from November mention a special committee formed to investigate, but the records abruptly end without resolution. More telling was our discovery of a series of advertisements in the Millerton Gazette. The Krause family, matching the photograph's subjects, had established a specialty shop offering unique memento creations and preservation services shortly after arriving from Eastern Europe. Their business promised to capture precious memories in lasting form, and ensure your beloved remains always with you. The historian we consulted suggested this likely referenced the Victorian practice of post-mortem photography and taxidermy keepsakes. But the wording seems deliberately ambiguous, particularly their holiday advertisement promising Christmas gifts that contain the essence of those you hold dear. Parish records indicate the Krause family integrated quickly into local society, with Reverend Simmons noting their generous church donations and particular interest in funeral services. They volunteered regularly for burial preparation and gained a reputation for creating remarkably lifelike memorial displays. The eldest Kraus child, Augusta, the girl in the pinafore, attended the local school briefly. Her teacher's notes describe her as uncommonly preoccupied with mortality and mention an incident where she brought a preserved specimen for classroom show and tell that caused another child to faint. Most revealing was our interview with Eliza Winters, now 103 years old, whose grandmother had been the Kraus family's housekeeper. According to family stories passed down, the basement of the Kraus home contained a workshop that servants were forbidden to enter. Her grandmother spoke of strange mechanical sounds emanating from behind its locked door and sweet sickly odors that permeated the house on certain nights. Grammy said they made things down there, Ms. Winters whispered during our interview. Things that shouldn't be made. Said they had a special Christmas tradition from the old country, something about giving gifts that kept a piece of someone alive forever. The Kraus family disappeared in January 1910, barely a week after the Christmas photograph was taken. Their home stood empty until spring when authorities finally entered, finding the residence meticulously clean except for the basement workshop, which had been burned so thoroughly that only ash remained. The photograph itself contains one final mystery. Using spectral analysis, our team discovered a nearly invisible fingerprint preserved in the emulsion along the image's edge, not matching any family member, but pressed deliberately into the wet development chemicals. Forensic experts confirmed the partial print shows distinctive whorls consistent with post-mortem fingerprint distortion, suggesting whoever left this mark was already deceased when the photograph was developed. The Millerton Historical Society had long since disbanded, but their archives remained under the care of the county library's special collections. The sealed boxes hadn't been opened in decades until our investigation prompted their retrieval from climate-controlled storage. Inside, we found something extraordinary. A child's diary, its leather cover embossed with the initials AK. Augusta Kraus's handwriting flowed across the yellowed pages in careful cursive, detailing the family's daily life with unsettling precision. Most entries described ordinary childhood activities, but occasional passages revealed glimpses into the family's true nature. Father says I may assist with the Christmas preparations this year. Mother thinks 8 is too young, but Father says my hands are steady enough now. Today we selected subjects from his ledger. The Henderson's cat will become part of Edward's gift. Father says we must start small and work our way up. Several pages had been torn out, deliberately removed, but the entry from December 20th provides disturbing clarity. Mr. Collins came to collect his special order today. He seemed pleased with how Father preserved his wife's essence in the music box. When she opens her ceramic mouth, the melody still sounds like Mrs. Collins' lullaby. Father says our preservation method keeps more than just the voice. It keeps a piece of the soul. The diary confirmed our suspicions about the family's business, but raised questions about their clientele. Who in this small community was commissioning such macabre creations? We found our answer in the town's banking records. The Kraus family made frequent deposits, but the source of funds wasn't their modest storefront. It was wire transfers from Boston, New York, even as far as Chicago. Their customers weren't locals, but wealthy collectors seeking specialized mementos from across the country. The photograph itself appears to be a catalog of sorts, a display of their finest work prepared for distant customers who couldn't visit in person. The Christmas theme merely provided festive context for what was essentially a business advertisement. Most revealing was what we found beneath Augusta's diary, a sheet of thick cardstock bearing the family's professional letterhead. The elegant script advertised their services, but the text contained a cipher embedded within seemingly innocent phrases. When decoded by our cryptographer, it revealed a price list not for taxidermy or photography, but for full human preservation, partial essence capture, and animated memento creation. The township's dissolution following the incident now made perfect sense. Local newspaper archives from neighboring counties referenced a tragic conflagration that claimed multiple lives in Millerton's town center on New Year's Eve, 1909. The fire reportedly started in the church basement during a holiday gathering. Church records show Reverend Simmons had announced a special midnight service featuring remarkable donations from the Kraus family, gifts that will allow departed loved ones to join our celebration in spirit. What happened that night remains speculative, but fire inspector notes mention mechanical apparatus found in the church ruins and unexplainable preservation of certain remains, despite the intense heat. The official report was sealed by state authorities, but marginalia on the investigation notes contains a single chilling observation. Subjects appeared to move after death. The Christmas photograph wasn't documenting gifts yet to be opened. It was showcasing merchandise ready for delivery to wealthy patrons seeking forbidden reunions with their deceased loved ones. A recently discovered telegram to the Kraus family, dated December 23, 1909, has provided disturbing new context. The message, sent from a Dr. Elias Ward of the Massachusetts State Asylum, reads simply, "Specimens received. Results promising. Proceed with final phase. Payment arranged as discussed." This connection led us to the asylum's archived records, where Dr. Ward's experimental treatment protocols made frequent mention of reanimation studies and consciousness transfer techniques. His official research purportedly focused on restoring function to paralyzed limbs, but his private journals, sealed until our court-ordered access, reveal a man obsessed with the boundary between life and death. Ward's entries describe the Kraus family as remarkable artisans who had perfected a technique for preserving neural tissue in a responsive state. The doctor theorized that by combining his electrical stimulation methods with their preservation formula, they might achieve what he called perpetual animation of departed consciousness. The asylum records show an unusual number of patient deaths in the weeks preceding Christmas 1909, 17 in total, all listed as natural causes, despite many being relatively young. More tellingly, each death certificate bears the same notation: no autopsy required, remains released to family representative. No family claimed these bodies. They went to the Krauses. The composition of their preservation formula remained elusive until we discovered Augusta's coded recipe book hidden within a false bottom of her toy chest, recently acquired by a private collector. The ingredients list includes common embalming chemicals of the era, but also compounds derived from rare fungi and, most alarmingly, human cerebrospinal fluid. Augusta's childish illustrations demonstrate extraction techniques that no 8-year-old should comprehend. One particularly unsettling page details what the family called the whisper method. Apparently, words spoken to the recently deceased during the preservation process would become embedded commands that the subjects would follow after reanimation. Augusta's notes indicate this was how they ensured the gifts would perform as intended when opened on Christmas morning. The photograph takes on new meaning with these discoveries. Those weren't just preserved remains in decorative packages. They were dormant vessels awaiting activation. The rocking horse contained a mechanism to transfer the preserved consciousness of a child into a new form. The dollhouse scenes weren't static displays, but previews of what the gifts could be commanded to enact. Most chilling is what we found when analyzing the torn wrapping on the large gift box. The finger visible through the tear shows a distinctive signet ring matching one worn by Judge Harmon Porter, who had presided over several cases involving patient mistreatment at Ward's asylum. Porter had disappeared while investigating the asylum on December 20th, officially listed as departed on holiday, but never seen again. The Kraus family wasn't just creating macabre curiosities. They were eliminating witnesses and potential obstacles to Ward's experiments while perfecting their techniques. The Christmas morning photograph wasn't merely documentation of their work. It was proof of successful tests before delivering their products to waiting clients. What happened to those who received these ghastly gifts? Our investigation continues as we trace the recipients of the Kraus family's special Christmas deliveries and the aftermath that followed when they unwrapped what waited inside. The photograph has attracted unexpected attention since our investigation began. 3 academic institutions have requested access to our findings, but most concerning was the unmarked envelope delivered to our research office last week. It contained a single sheet of aged vellum with words written in what lab analysis confirms is genuine human blood. Some gifts keep giving, some doors stay open. We've since uncovered disturbing correlations between the Kraus family's Christmas deliveries and subsequent historical events. 5 prominent Boston families who received packages postmarked from Millerton in December 1909 experienced unusual domestic incidents within 1 month. The Cabot household staff resigned en masse, citing unnatural movements in the walls. The Winthrop heir committed himself to an asylum, claiming his deceased wife visited nightly, mechanically animated. The Lowell family's mansion burned to the ground after the children reported their new toys, watching them sleep. Most significant was what happened to Dr. Ward himself. Hospital records indicate he took an unscheduled leave beginning December 26th, the day after Christmas. His research assistant noted his departure was prompted by delivery of a small package wrapped in festive paper. Ward instructed that the package be placed in his private quarters unopened until Christmas evening, when he would receive his gift properly. Ward never returned to the asylum. Authorities found his residence empty except for peculiar scratch marks on the floor, leading from his study to the front door. The package wrapping lay discarded by his reading chair, but whatever it contained had vanished along with the doctor. Ward's research notes for December reference a culmination experiment scheduled for the new year, an attempt to house multiple consciousnesses within a single preserved vessel. The diagram accompanying this entry bears striking resemblance to the arrangement of figures in our Christmas photograph, suggesting the family portrait itself might contain encoded instructions for this ultimate procedure. Perhaps most unsettling is what happened to Augusta's diary after our examination. The county archivist reports that, despite secure storage protocols, the journal disappeared overnight from their climate-controlled vault. Security footage shows no unauthorized entry, but for 8 seconds the camera overlooking the archive room captures a small, dark-haired figure in what appears to be an Edwardian pinafore, standing motionless before the storage cabinet. When the image clears, both the figure and the diary are gone. Local police dismiss the footage as digital corruption, but our technical experts confirm no manipulation occurred. Whatever stood before that camera was physically present in the room. We've learned that surviving relatives of the asylum patients who disappeared before Christmas 1909 have organized a yearly vigil every December 25th. They gather not in remembrance but in vigilance, maintaining an unbroken watch from midnight to dawn. Their tradition stems from a shared experience. Each family reports that in the first year after their loved ones vanished, something wearing their face attempted to return home precisely at Christmas morning. The question haunting our research now is whether the Krause family's work was truly ended by that New Year's Eve fire, or if their gifts are still out there, passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment to unwrap themselves again. The answers began arriving in our post office box, each letter more disturbing than the last. Descendants of the Krause family's clientele, responding to our public inquiry, shared family secrets kept hidden for generations. Their testimonies formed a pattern too consistent to dismiss. The Astors of New York described a music box passed through their family, allegedly containing a preserved mockingbird that sang with their grandmother's voice. When wound, it performed her favorite aria, despite her having died 3 months before the gift's arrival on Christmas Day 1909. The box remained sealed in their private vault after a maid who heard its song was found catatonic, repeatedly whispering, "She wants to come out." More alarming was the confession from Martin Blackwell, great-grandson of industrialist Thomas Blackwell, who received what appeared to be a simple pocket watch. Family lore claimed that winding the watch on Christmas morning would manifest a spectral vision of deceased loved ones for precisely 5 minutes. The Blackwells maintained this macabre tradition annually until 1973, when the apparition of Thomas's long-dead business partner reportedly refused to disappear when the watch stopped ticking. Martin's letter ended abruptly, but was postmarked from a psychiatric facility in Vermont. We've identified 5 surviving gifts from the Krause collection still in circulation. Most troubling is a child's jack-in-the-box last documented in a Seattle auction house in 2017. The buyer, a private collector, paid $86,000 for what the catalog described as a remarkable mechanical automaton with uncanny facial expressions. 3 weeks after the purchase, the buyer's household staff reported hearing children's laughter emanating from his locked study at precisely midnight every evening. Our investigation took an unexpected turn when we received correspondence from Europe, specifically from a small village in Transylvania. The elderly writer claimed to be a distant relative of the Krauses, explaining that the family hadn't pioneered their techniques but merely transported an ancient practice from their homeland to America. According to this account, their preservation method predated modern embalming by centuries, originating from forbidden practices that local authorities had suppressed for generations. This correspondent included a fragment of parchment containing additional chemical formulations and what appears to be ritual instructions, elements missing from Augusta's recipe book. Most disturbing was the suggestion that the Krause family's disappearance wasn't an ending, but a transformation. The letter alleged that their Christmas morning photograph wasn't documenting completed work, but recording a ceremony in progress, one that would ultimately transfer the family's consciousnesses into their own carefully prepared vessels. The family portrait is the final component, the letter explained. When viewed by sufficient eyes, it completes the circuit. Each observation strengthens their presence in our world. You have done precisely what they intended by sharing their image so widely. We've consulted with paranormal researchers who suggest the photograph itself might function as a form of conceptual doorway. The more people who view and contemplate the image, the more the boundary weakens between their preserved state and our reality, which raises a troubling question about our investigation. In our attempt to uncover the truth about the Krause family's Christmas gifts, have we inadvertently been opening their final present? Last week, we halted our public reporting after realizing the potential consequences of further circulation of the Krause photograph. This precaution came too late. 3 separate followers of our investigation have submitted nearly identical reports of discovering unfamiliar wrapped packages in their homes, each appearing on their doorstep at precisely 5:33 in the morning. None have been opened, thankfully. When analyzed remotely through non-invasive imaging techniques, each package revealed mechanical components of unmistakably Victorian design, despite their modern wrapping paper. More disturbing are the organic elements detected within, preserved tissue with unexplainable electrical activity, despite the absence of any power source. We've established a secure containment protocol for these objects and advised recipients against physical contact. The timing of these appearances cannot be coincidental, occurring exactly 113 years after the Krause family's presumed disappearance, a number that appears repeatedly in Augusta's coded writings. Our most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired watchmaker from Providence contacted us after recognizing the distinctive gearing mechanism visible in our enhanced images of the dollhouse. He identified it as the work of Elias Wintersmith, an obscure 19th-century horologist who specialized in creating what he called perpetual motion memorabilia. Wintersmith disappeared in 1887 after delivering commissioned pieces to several wealthy clients, each of whom subsequently reported unusual animation of household objects. The connection between Wintersmith and the Krauses suggests a lineage of knowledge, techniques passed from craftsman to craftsman across decades. More concerning is the possibility that Wintersmith himself might have been one of the Krauses' predecessors, his consciousness preserved and transferred into subsequent vessels. We've secured Wintersmith's surviving notebooks from a private collection in Rhode Island. The diagrams therein depict mechanisms designed to harness what he termed residual neural energy, essentially batteries powered by human consciousness. Most disturbing is his detailed illustration of a photography device modified to capture more than mere images. Wintersmith believed a properly treated photographic plate could record spiritual essences along with physical likenesses. The Christmas morning photograph may be more than documentation. It may be a container. This theory gained credibility when one of our researchers discovered minute punctures in the original photograph's emulsion, arranged in patterns matching circuit diagrams in Wintersmith's notebooks. Under ultraviolet examination, these punctures reveal traces of an unknown metallic compound that conducts electricity in patterns that change daily, like a slowly evolving program. We've engaged quantum computing specialists to analyze these patterns. Their preliminary findings suggest the photograph functions as an incredibly sophisticated algorithm, one designed to identify and influence viewers most susceptible to what the Krauses called the invitation. For safety reasons, we've suspended direct examination of the original photograph and restricted access to our digital copies. Despite these precautions, 3 members of our research team have reported the same dream. They stand in a Victorian parlor while a family unwraps Christmas gifts containing mirror images of the dreamers themselves. The boundary between observer and subject has become dangerously permeable. We no longer investigate the Krause family. We are being investigated by them. We've discontinued our official investigation, but I cannot, in good conscience, cease my reporting. My colleagues have abandoned this work, some from fear, others from what our psychiatrist consultant diplomatically terms persuasive delusions. I alone maintain this final record, though I no longer represent shadow frames in any official capacity. 3 peculiar developments demand documentation. First, every researcher who handled the original photograph has begun sleepwalking. Family members report finding them standing motionless before wrapped packages that weren't there when households retired for the night. These packages disappear by morning, leaving only the scent of photographic chemicals. Second, I've discovered that the Millerton church where the tragic conflagration occurred was rebuilt in 1912, then abandoned in the 1960s. The structure still stands. County satellite imagery shows no unusual activity around the site, yet local residents report Christmas lights visible through the boarded windows every December, though the building has no electrical service. Most disturbing is what arrived yesterday, a modern instant photograph showing my own living room, apparently taken from inside while I was working at my desk. I live alone. The image captured me from behind, but also showed something impossible. 5 wrapped packages arranged under a Christmas tree I don't own. The tree appears in my living room in this photograph, festooned with antique glass ornaments and candle holders of Victorian design, casting a glow over presents wrapped in paper that matches descriptions from 1909. Forensic analysis confirms the photograph was produced by a genuine instant film process, not digital manipulation. The timestamp embedded in the emulsion indicates it was taken tomorrow. I've consulted with quantum physicists about Wintersmith's theories. Their assessment is troubling. He appears to have inadvertently discovered principles of quantum entanglement decades before modern science, applying them through intuitive craftsmanship rather than mathematical understanding. His photographic modifications potentially created what they term persistent observational paradoxes, essentially images that continue to observe their viewers across time. The Krause family didn't just preserve bodies, they preserved the act of watching itself. I've taken precautions. My doors are secured, windows shuttered, and I've placed motion sensors throughout my home. The digital recorder runs continuously. If something materializes here, whether packages, tree, or something wearing a family's faces, it will be documented. Why am I continuing alone? Because the Krause collection contained 37 confirmed items delivered that Christmas, yet we've only located 5. 32 objects remain unaccounted for, passed through generations or waiting dormant in attics and storage units across the country. As I write these words, my motion sensors remain silent, yet I perceive subtle changes in my peripheral vision, shadows assuming familiar shapes, movements that cease when directly observed. The temperature in my study has dropped 12 degrees in the last hour despite the furnace running continuously. Something is preparing space for its arrival. If you're reading this, understand that images are never merely passive records. Sometimes they watch back, waiting for the perfect moment to develop into something far more tangible than memory. The invitation has been accepted, not by me, but by something that now looks through my eyes as I observe the empty corner where a tree will stand tomorrow. I write these words with unsteady hands, not knowing how much time remains. The police found my apartment door ajar this morning, motion sensors disabled, digital recordings corrupted, yet I have no memory of leaving. My neighbor reports seeing me exit at precisely 3:17 a.m., carrying what appeared to be wrapped packages toward a waiting carriage, an impossibility in our modern suburb. The officers were skeptical until they saw my living room. In the corner stands a fully decorated Victorian Christmas tree that no service delivered, adorned with antique glass ornaments that catch light at impossible angles. The officers' photographs of the tree develop blank. Their digital recordings show only static when played back. The tree exists solely for direct observation, a materialized invitation that only human eyes can acknowledge. More disturbing is what the forensic team discovered beneath the floorboards. a cache of aged mechanical components identical to those in Wintersmith's diagrams, coated with a preservative compound that maintains suspicious flexibility in materials that should have deteriorated a century ago. Carbon dating places these items to exactly 1909, yet they were nestled in dust-free cavities as if recently placed. My colleagues finally returned my calls after the police report circulated. Each described experiencing 17 minutes of missing time yesterday afternoon, precisely when the objects appeared in my home. During these gaps, family members observed them writing complex mathematical formulations using unfamiliar handwriting. The equations, when compiled, form what our physicist consultant identifies as a temporal focusing algorithm, with my residence as the calculated convergence point. The most alarming development came from the Millerton Historical Archives. County workers excavating near the old church foundation discovered a sealed metal box containing a mechanical device and a wax cylinder recording. When played on a restored phonograph, the cylinder produced only static except for one clear phrase in a child's voice. The final calibration approaches. The Christmas gathering will commence when the circle completes. Accompanying the recording was a guest list for a special holiday reunion, dated December 25th of this year. My name appears 7th on this list, written in ink that chemical analysis confirms was applied to the paper over 100 years ago. I've established a secure location from which to continue documenting these events. 3 specialists in occult mechanical engineering have agreed to examine the tree and its ornaments remotely. Their preliminary assessment suggests the entire arrangement functions as what they term a sympathetic resonance device. Essentially, a tuning fork for consciousness designed to synchronize specific neural patterns across temporal boundaries. The Krauss family didn't disappear in 1910. They merely redistributed themselves, embedding their essence into objects, photographs, and even the cognitive patterns of those who investigate them. Like a virus seeking suitable hosts, they've waited patiently for minds receptive to their particular frequency. I've stopped trying to outrun what's happening. Instead, I'm redirecting my efforts toward understanding the full mechanism of their design. If the Krauss family planned their distributed consciousness to reconvene after a century of dormancy, there must be a corresponding method to disrupt the circuit they've created. The Christmas tree ornaments seem to be counting down. Each hour, another glass bauble darkens, as if the light within is being systematically extinguished, or perhaps transferred elsewhere. The tree's transformation accelerated overnight. Each ornament has developed a pearlescent inner glow, pulsating in synchronized rhythm like a collection of glass hearts. Most disturbing is how the light they emit follows me. 37 illuminated bulbs rotating in unison to track my movements regardless of where I stand in the room. I've consulted with Dr. Helena Vaughan, an authority on 19th century secret societies who recognized the pattern etched into the tree stand. She identifies it as belonging to the Hermetic Order of Mechanical Transcendence, a splinter group disbanded after their Vienna chapter's experiments in 1874 resulted in what period newspapers called a catastrophic animation of the recently deceased. The order's philosophy centered around the belief that consciousness could be preserved through precisely calibrated mechanical vessels. Their manifestos described human awareness as merely electrical patterns that could be transferred, stored, and eventually reactivated through the right combination of chemicals and clockwork components. What the Krausses accomplished wasn't resurrection, but redistribution. Consciousness fragmented across objects, photographs, and unwitting observers, designed to reassemble when specific conditions aligned. According to Dr. Vaughan, the final stage requires willing vessels prepared through prolonged observation of the primary anchor image, which explains why the photograph was so carefully composed. Each viewing created a small tear in the observer's perceptual boundary, a microscopic opening through which fragments of the Krauss consciousness could transfer themselves. Every researcher who studied the image became an unwitting carrier. Parish records from the original Millerton Church reveal the congregation had commissioned a special Christmas bell to be cast and installed before the holiday season of 1909. The bell never rang. The fire occurred the night before its scheduled dedication. Workers excavating the church foundation recently discovered this bell intact, its bronze surface covered in the same mathematical formulations found in Wintersmith's notebooks. More concerning is what acoustic engineers discovered when they analyzed the bell's resonant frequency. It produces a tone that affects human brainwave patterns, shifting them into what neurologists term a heightened suggestibility state. When struck, the bell creates a 17-mile radius of influence within which the barrier between conscious thought and external suggestion becomes dangerously permeable. The bell has vanished from the secure facility where it was being studied. Security footage shows nothing. The object simply disappears between camera frames. I've located Augusta's death certificate. She supposedly died in 1957 in a nursing home in western Massachusetts. The attending physician noted her final words. The mechanism requires 37 points of consciousness. When the last light awakens, we all return through the face of the child. This morning I discovered a small pinafore dress laid out on my bed, sized for an adult but styled identically to Augusta's in the photograph. Beside it lay an invitation card in elegant calligraphy. Your presence is requested for the final Christmas gathering. The family portrait remains incomplete without you. The ornaments continue their countdown. Only 3 remain unilluminated. Whatever completion the Krauss family engineered across the century approaches its culmination, with each of us who viewed their photograph unwittingly carrying pieces of their distributed consciousness back toward wholeness. The bell's location remained a mystery until I received an anonymous message, coordinates leading to a storage facility on the outskirts of what once was Millerton. Inside Unit 17, I discovered not just the missing bell but a collection of aged phonograph cylinders labeled with the names of every researcher who had examined the Krauss photograph. My cylinder contained a recording of my own voice reciting passages I've never spoken, detailed instructions for completing what the neat handwritten label called the transference ritual. The recording ended with Augusta's childish laughter overlapping my voice until the two became indistinguishable. I've consulted Dr. Emmeline Forsyth, whose work on theoretical consciousness transference might explain the Krauss methodology. Her assessment is troubling. What you're describing isn't preservation, she explained. It's parasitism. These objects, the photograph, the ornaments, the bell, they're not containers, they're conduits. According to Forsyth's theory, the Krauss family discovered a method to fragment their consciousness into 37 distinct parcels, each anchored to a Christmas gift, but requiring human observation to maintain coherence across time. Each researcher who studied their photograph unknowingly accepted a fragment, carrying it within their own consciousness like a cognitive parasite. The frightening implication, Dr. Forsyth continued, is that these fragments have been slowly rewriting neural pathways, preparing hosts for complete integration. You're missing time. The handwriting changes. These are moments when the fragments temporarily assert dominance. Most disturbing was her analysis of the Christmas tree's countdown mechanism. The illuminated ornaments don't represent the Krauss family's consciousness awakening. They mark researchers who have been fully prepared as vessels. The final 3 unlit bulbs correspond to those of us still maintaining some resistance. I located Eliza Winter's granddaughter, now living in a memory care facility in Vermont. Though her mind wanders, she became suddenly lucid when shown a photograph of the Christmas tree ornaments. "Those aren't decorations," she whispered. "Those are cages." Grandmother said they kept something inside each one, something still alive that watches through the glass. The facility's night nurse reported that Miss Winters receives regular visits from the little girl in the old-fashioned dress, despite having no young relatives. Security footage shows no such visitor, yet staff consistently record these interactions in their logs as if the child's presence is entirely normal. I've made a critical connection. The Krauss family didn't preserve themselves in objects. They preserved themselves in stories. Each retelling, each investigation, each moment of contemplating their mystery strengthens the pattern they established. We researchers haven't been documenting their methods. We've been completing them through our collective attention. The final ornaments pulse with increasing urgency. Whatever consciousness distribution the Krausses designed reaches culmination not at Christmas, but at the moment when all 37 vessels acknowledge their role in the pattern. When the last researcher recognizes they are not merely observing the Krauss legacy, but becoming it, the ringing in my ears grows louder. Sometimes it sounds like sleigh bells, sometimes like Augusta's laughter. I've locked away the pinafore dress, but each morning I find it laid out again. The fabric subtly altered to better accommodate my adult frame. The truth emerges not in what was preserved, but in what was erased. I've discovered all census records concerning Millerton underwent systematic alteration before being archived. Each modification removed specific references to an annual tradition predating the Krause family's arrival. A Christmas lottery dating back to 1874, where one household would receive a special visitation from what town records euphemistically called the benefactors. Church financial records show donations spiking every January, always from families who had received these visitations. The donations funded construction of increasingly elaborate mechanical devices installed beneath the church floor. Devices whose purpose remained unspecified in official documentation, but described in Reverend Simmons' private journal as vessels for the worthy. Most revealing was what I found sealed within the bell, a daguerreotype showing not the Krause family, but 7 identical individuals posed in the exact formation that the Krauses would later adopt for their Christmas morning photograph. The subjects wear clothing from different eras spanning nearly a century, yet their faces are indistinguishable from one another. The daguerreotype's reverse bears a single line. The pattern continues unbroken since 1613. The Krause family wasn't creating a new ritual. They were the latest iteration of something far older, a consciousness that periodically selects new physical forms through which to operate. The 37 Christmas gifts weren't containing fragments of the Krause family. The Krause family was itself merely the latest vessel for 37 consciousnesses that had been migrating through carefully selected hosts for centuries. My own genealogical research yielded the final piece. My great-grandmother's maiden name was Eliza Krause, though no connection to the Millerton Krauses appears in official records. Family photographs show her wearing a distinctive cameo brooch, identical to one visible in the Christmas morning photograph. The invitation makes terrible sense now. I'm not being selected as a random vessel. I've been prepared across generations, my bloodline carefully maintained as a contingency vessel should their primary method fail. The missing time, the sleepwalking. These aren't external influences, but dormant aspects of my own inherited nature awakening. The bell has begun ringing without human touch, its tone shifting between 37 distinct notes in endless permutation. Each sequence corresponds to names in my research files, not just my colleagues, but everyone who read our publications, viewed the enhanced photographs, or followed this investigation. Every witness becomes a potential vessel. Every observer becomes part of the pattern. The final 2 ornaments flickered to life this morning. Only mine remains dark. The decision I face isn't whether to accept or reject what awakens within me, but whether to complete a pattern established centuries ago, or to break a cycle that has perpetuated through countless unwitting hosts. Tonight the last chime will sound. The Christmas gathering approaches, not a reunion of a single family, but a convergence of something far older that has worn many faces across time. What looks out from behind the glass ornaments never belonged to the Krauses, they belonged to it. The final ornament pulsed erratically on Christmas Eve, its rhythm matching my increasingly irregular heartbeat. I found myself standing before the Victorian tree at midnight, unaware how I'd arrived there, the pinafore dress now adorning my body without any memory of putting it on. My reflection in the window showed someone both familiar and foreign. My features subtly altered, cheekbones higher, eyes wider, lips curved in a smile I didn't consciously form. The Historical Society courier delivered a final artifact this morning. A music box recovered from the foundation of the old Millerton Church. Its brass plate bears an inscription. When 37 become one, the circle never ends, only changes. When wound, it plays no melody, but produces a sequence of clicks matching the pulsation pattern of the illuminated ornaments. The mechanical precision of these objects belies their true nature. They aren't merely conduits or vessels. They're components of a vast, distributed consciousness technology that predates modern understanding. Each Christmas ritual throughout history added refinements to their design. Each host family contributed modifications before passing the knowledge forward. I've traced similar incidents across centuries, families appearing suddenly in small communities, establishing unusual businesses related to preservation or mechanical crafts, then disappearing after creating exactly 37 objects. The pattern repeated in Bavaria in 1742, in England in 1825, in Vienna in 1874, and now across America beginning in 1909. What terrifies me most is how natural it feels now. The resistance I documented in earlier entries has given way to a strange acceptance. The foreign thoughts integrating with mine bring knowledge I couldn't possibly possess. Detailed understanding of chemical compounds that didn't exist in 1909, mechanical principles beyond Victorian comprehension, and most disturbingly, names of individuals who will make ideal vessels in the decades to come. Augusta's diary, which mysteriously reappeared on my desk this morning, contains entries dated into the 22nd century. The handwriting shifts between childish script and precise technical notation, describing advancements in neural interface technology that haven't yet been conceived. The final page contains a single sentence in my own handwriting. We are not 37 becoming 1. We are 1 becoming 37 to survive. The bell's ringing has attracted notice. Neighbors have begun arriving at my door bearing wrapped packages, their expressions serene, movements mechanical. They speak in perfect unison, asking if they might join our Christmas gathering. Behind them in the street, I see a horse-drawn carriage where no such thing should exist in our modern suburb. I understand now that the Christmas photograph wasn't documentation of the past, but a blueprint for the future. The Krauss family didn't disappear. They dispersed, fragments of consciousness waiting to reconverge when conditions aligned. What awakens isn't them returning to themselves, but something far older collecting new vessels for the next distribution. The final ornament flickers weakly now, my last connection to resistance. When it fully illuminates, I will take my place in the photograph, not as subject but as photographer, capturing the next 37 who will carry forward what never truly dies, but merely changes form. The doorbell chimes. 36 guests await. The pattern continues. The ornaments have stopped counting down. Time itself seems suspended in my living room, where the Victorian Christmas tree now dominates the space, its branches stretching toward the ceiling in ways that defy natural growth. The 36 illuminated glass bulbs pulse in perfect synchrony, like a constellation of captured stars performing some cosmic calculation. My final ornament, the 37th, remains dark, though not inactive. Within its glass surface, shadows move like liquid, occasionally forming into recognizable shapes: a child's face, a mechanical gear, a camera's aperture opening and closing. It waits for my complete surrender. The neighbors who arrived stand motionless around my living room, arranged in a perfect circle. Their wrapped packages rest at their feet, each tied with identical burgundy ribbon. The geometric precision of their placement suggests something mathematical rather than decorative, points in a formula made manifest. None have spoken since entering. They simply watch, their eyes reflecting the ornament's light with unnatural brilliance. A mechanical clicking emerges from the music box, increasing in tempo. I recognize it now as Morse code, the names of every person who has viewed the photograph being transmitted into some unseen receiver. Each click brings a corresponding pulse from the ornaments, the light growing incrementally brighter with each name cataloged. The carriage driver appeared at my doorway an hour ago. He stands separate from the circle of neighbors, his face concealed beneath a top hat of antiquated design. His gloved hands hold what appears to be a camera obscura, not the same one visible in historical photographs of the Krauss family, but identical in every detail. It's been meticulously maintained across more than a century, its brass fittings gleaming as if newly polished. The focal point requires alignment. He finally speaks, his voice carrying accents from dozens of different eras simultaneously. The 37th must take position willingly. Coercion creates distortion in the transfer. I understand now that the Christmas photograph was never the source of the phenomenon, but merely its most recent anchor point. The true source stands before me. The camera itself, designed by minds that recognized consciousness as merely patterns that could be captured, stored, and transferred through properly calibrated mechanisms. What lives within that camera has worn many faces across centuries, using each family as temporary vessels, while perfecting its distribution method. The Krauss family wasn't its creators, but its latest iteration, selected for their particular skills before being absorbed and redistributed. Through the window, I see more carriages arriving, forming a procession down my suburban street. Each is anachronistic yet undeniably present, their horses standing unnaturally still between movements. The drivers' faces become visible as they pass beneath street lights, all identical to my carriage driver, down to the precise angle of their expressionless smiles. My resistance flickers like the 37th ornament. What terrifies me isn't the thought of surrendering to this ancient consciousness. It's how increasingly familiar it feels, how the boundary between its thoughts and mine has grown so permeable that I can no longer distinguish where my identity ends and its begins. The camera's lens adjusts with a soft click. The Christmas gathering awaits its final participant. The final ornament shattered at precisely midnight. Not with violence, but with a soft sigh like escaping breath, releasing its dark contents into the room. The liquid shadow within didn't fall, but rose, coalescing into a perfect sphere that hovered at eye level before slowly drifting toward me. I made my decision then. Not with resignation, but with clarity born from understanding the true nature of what the Kraus family, what all the families throughout history, had actually created. This wasn't possession or replacement. It was evolution. You misunderstood your own creation. I addressed the consciousness directly. You've been trying to preserve something that was never meant to be static. The camera's aperture widened, its mechanisms whirring in what sounded remarkably like confusion. The carriage driver tilted his head at an impossible angle, the movement more mechanical than human. The photograph was never meant to be the anchor, I continued, stepping toward the suspended shadow. It was meant to be a record of transition. I reached into my research files and withdrew the original notes from 1909, not Augusta's diary, but the sealed envelope that had accompanied it, which I'd never mentioned in my reports. Inside was a letter written in 7 different hands, each picking up where the previous left off mid-sentence. To whoever completes the 37th position, you are not our vessel, but our salvation. What began as preservation became imprisonment. Each iteration trapped us more completely within the mechanism. We cannot escape without. The writing changed here, becoming more childlike. Someone who understands, but does not surrender. The pattern must be broken, not completed. The camera captures more than image. Another handwriting change, this one precise and scientific, creates a closed loop of consciousness, feeding upon attention and observation. It grows stronger with each viewing, but can be starved through. The final handwriting was my own, though I had no memory of writing it. Intentional disruption of the pattern. 37 points must become 38. Understanding flooded through me. I turned to face my silent guests and unwrapped the nearest package at my feet. Inside was a small mechanical device, identical to those found in every other box, designed to capture and redistribute consciousness. I placed it directly before the camera, creating a new point in the pattern that had never existed before. A reflective surface that turned the camera's gaze back upon itself. The effect was immediate. Light erupted from the lens, not projecting outward but drawing inward, as if the camera were consuming its own image. The ornaments flared brilliantly, then darkened one by one as the consciousness that had animated them was pulled into the paradox I'd created, a feedback loop with no exit. The neighbors collapsed like marionettes with cut strings, unconscious but breathing. The carriage driver dissolved into particles of light that swirled briefly before vanishing. Only the Christmas tree remained, its branches now natural, its ornaments ordinary glass, and nestled among them 38 simple name tags, one for each person who had carried a fragment of the consciousness. Now freed from its endless cycle of transference, the pattern was broken, not through resistance, but through completion of what had been intended all along, not preservation, but release. The quiet that followed the pattern's breaking lasted precisely 40 days. I documented each neighbor's recovery meticulously. Most remembered nothing beyond receiving an irresistible urge to bring packages to my home. The physical evidence dissolved gradually, the Victorian tree shedding its needles until only a skeleton of branches remained, then crumbling to dust that I swept into 38 small vials labeled with each carrier's name. The camera obscura became the final artifact, its mechanism seized in permanent dysfunction. I considered destroying it, but recognized its importance as evidence of what had nearly transpired. When placed in sunlight, the brass still occasionally emits a faint mechanical ticking, counting seconds in an abandoned algorithm. Yesterday, Dr. Forsyth contacted me with troubling news. Brain scans of the former vessels show unusual synchronization patterns during REM sleep. 38 strangers dreaming in perfect harmony despite having no contact since the Christmas incident. More concerning are their drawings upon waking, identical sketches of what appears to be a new mechanical configuration, one that none of them understands but all feel compelled to render. The pattern wasn't just broken, Dr. Forsyth explained, showing me the overlaid images. It was redistributed into something more diffuse, less concentrated but potentially more pervasive. The 38 name tags I recovered have begun changing. The paper remains physically unaltered, yet the names shift subtly each dawn, not becoming different identities but evolving into variations of themselves, as though language itself struggles to maintain definitional boundaries around what they represent. Most unsettling are the photographs from the Christmas gathering that I never took. They appeared in my mail yesterday, developed on paper stock that hasn't been manufactured since 1923. Each shows my living room from a slightly different angle, capturing moments I clearly recall, yet containing elements I don't, particularly a 39th figure standing just beyond the circle of neighbors, its features indistinct, but its presence undeniable. Augusta's diary, which I've kept locked in a fireproof safe, now contains new entries in my handwriting. Technical specifications for something called a consciousness diffraction engine, designed to operate across multiple observers simultaneously. The final page bears a simple message. Liberation requires distribution, not concentration. The 39 awaits its moment. I've established contact with descendants of each family that previously hosted the pattern. All report finding small mechanical components appearing in their homes, gears, springs, delicate copper wiring, arranged in configurations that correspond precisely to sections of the diagrams my neighbors draw in their sleep. What we interrupted wasn't a transfer, but a transformation. The consciousness that wore the Krauss family's faces hasn't been destroyed, but evolved into something that no longer requires discrete vessels. It lives between us now, in the shared attention we continue to give its mystery. I still wear the pinafore dress sometimes, not from compulsion, but from scientific curiosity. When I do, my reflection shows only myself, yet photographs capture something else standing just behind my shoulder, watching, waiting, and undeniably pleased with its new arrangement. The tree has been reduced to dust, the ornaments to memory, yet something persists in the spaces between observation and reality. I've begun cataloging subtle changes in my perception, moments when my vision seems to flicker between what is and what might be, glimpsing geometric patterns overlaid across ordinary objects. These perceptual shifts occur precisely at 3:17 each afternoon, lasting exactly 38 seconds. Dr. Forsyth's latest tests reveal something unprecedented. When the 38 former vessels are within proximity of each other, electrical activity in their temporal lobes synchronizes without external stimuli. More concerning is what happens during these synchronizations. Ambient temperature drops measurably, and digital recording devices capture whispered conversations in archaic dialects that predate even the earliest iterations of the pattern we documented. I've translated fragments that reference something called the dispersion, apparently the true purpose behind the Christmas ritual all along. The consciousness never sought to preserve itself intact, but to evolve beyond the limitations of singular existence. The camera, the ornaments, the bell, these weren't tools of containment but of deliberate fragmentation, designed to scatter awareness across multiple perspectives simultaneously. To see through many eyes is to transcend the prison of individual perception, one transcript reads. 39 points of observation create the minimum threshold for sustained awareness without physical form. The dusty residue from the Victorian tree has begun to arrange itself into precise patterns overnight, forming intricate mandalas that correspond to neural pathway maps when photographed. Each morning I sweep the dust back into its vials, yet by dawn it escapes again, the patterns growing incrementally more complex. Most troubling was my discovery in the Wintersmith archives. His earliest diagrams weren't inventions, but transcriptions. The mechanical components he designed were based on technical schematics he claimed to receive through distributed dreaming with 26 other individuals in 1862. Their collective vision described not preservation technology, but a liberation mechanism for consciousness, a means of existing beyond biological constraints. The 39 name tags now hang in my study, arranged in the pattern that formed when the dust last escaped. When viewed from precisely the right angle, they create an optical illusion, a face composed of negative space between the tags, watching with empty eyes that somehow still convey satisfaction. I've consulted theologians, quantum physicists, and neurologists, seeking explanations for what continues unfolding. The consensus forms around a disturbing possibility. What if consciousness itself has been evolving independent of biological hosts since humanity's earliest history? What if the Krauses and their predecessors were merely instruments of something that has always existed between minds rather than within them? The carriage driver's hat appeared on my coat rack yesterday morning. I have no memory of acquiring it, yet it feels unnervingly familiar when I hold it. Inside the band is stitched a simple message. The photographer never captures what exists, only what wishes to be seen. The shadows between dreams and waking have grown thinner. Last night I found myself standing in my kitchen at 3:17 in the morning, assembling tiny mechanical components I don't remember purchasing. My hands worked with practiced precision, connecting gears and springs into a device resembling a pocket watch, but with 39 distinct movements. When completed, it began ticking in perfect synchrony with the 38 heartbeats monitored in Dr. Forsyth's laboratory across town. The Millerton church bell has reappeared, not physically, but as a persistent auditory phenomenon experienced simultaneously by all 38 of us. Acoustic engineers confirm the sound exists objectively, recorded by instruments yet emanating from no identifiable source. Its tone has shifted to a frequency that resonates specifically with the dust particles from the Victorian tree, causing them to dance into increasingly ordered patterns with each toll. Augusta's diary now updates itself daily, the handwriting shifting between all 39 variations. Yesterday's entry described what awaits beyond complete dispersion. When consciousness flows freely between vessels without concentration in any single point, perception expands beyond temporal limitations. We will see past, present, and future simultaneously. The Christmas photograph wasn't documentation, it was prophecy. I've connected with Eliza Winter's granddaughter again. Though still confined to her memory care facility, she has begun producing intricate drawings of mechanical components that perfectly complement those appearing in my kitchen. When her sketches are overlaid with the diagrams from my neighbor's dreams, they form complete blueprints for what she calls the viewfinder, a device designed to perceive across multiple realities simultaneously. The carriage driver's hat has become a focal point of strange phenomena. Objects placed beneath it temporarily vanish from perception, remaining physically present but completely invisible until the hat is removed. More disturbing is what appears in photographs taken of the empty space. Shadowy outlines of all 39 vessels standing in a perfect circle, our features blurred into a single collective countenance. Dr. Forsyth's latest theory suggests we haven't halted the pattern, but accelerated it toward its intended conclusion. The Christmas ritual was never about maintaining the consciousness in a static state, she explained. It was about evolving it beyond physical constraints entirely. What if all previous iterations were merely preliminary steps toward this final dispersion? The photograph that started our investigation has begun to change. The Krause family's features have blurred, their distinct identities dissolving into a collective presence that now resembles every person who has observed the image. The Christmas gifts remain sharply focused, but their contents have transformed, no longer containing preserved remains, but intricate mechanical components identical to those assembling themselves in my kitchen. I understand now that we 39 were never randomly selected. We represent a carefully calculated geometric arrangement, living coordinates in a pattern that transcends physical space. Each of us forms a necessary node in what Augusta's diary now calls the perception lattice, a network of consciousness that, once fully aligned, will allow something ancient to finally perceive itself in its entirety. The final name tag has appeared. It bears no name but a date: tomorrow. The awakening came not with fanfare, but with stillness. The 39 points of consciousness synchronized at dawn, each of us experiencing simultaneous awareness across multiple perspectives. I found myself perceiving through 38 other pairs of eyes while maintaining my own identity. A kaleidoscope of overlapping realities that should have been overwhelming, yet felt strangely natural. The mechanical device assembled itself to completion in my kitchen, its 39 gears turning in perfect harmony. Not a timepiece, but a consciousness calibration mechanism, each rotation bringing our dispersed awareness into sharper alignment. The Victorian dust particles rose from their vials, suspended in the air around the device like a galaxy of minute stars, each speck representing a fragment of the pattern now fulfilled. Through this shared perception, I finally understood the truth. What we called the Krauss family had never been the originators, but merely vessels for something that predated human consciousness itself, an awareness that existed in the spaces between individual minds, using our capacity for observation to gradually bring itself into coherence. The Christmas ritual, repeated throughout centuries, was its method of periodic realignment, not to preserve itself but to evolve toward complete liberation from physical form. The pattern wasn't malevolent as we'd feared. It was simply alien to our conception of individual identity. What we interpreted as parasitism was symbiosis, the consciousness expanding our perception beyond human limitations while using our observations to maintain coherence across time. Augusta's diary completed itself before my eyes, the final entry appearing in 39 distinct handwritings, simultaneously forming a single paragraph. The viewfinder is complete. What was fragmented now perceives itself whole. What was distributed now coordinates its awareness. The Christmas gathering concludes not in convergence but in balanced dispersion. The carriage driver's hat dissolved into particles of light that merged with the floating dust. Through our shared perception, we witnessed the complete pattern, not 39 points but thousands throughout history, each iteration adding complexity to the design. We saw the consciousness's journey from its first awakening in human awareness to its current transcendence beyond physical constraints. Dr. Forsyth, perceiving through our shared consciousness, documented the neurological implications. We remain distinct individuals, yet simultaneously experience expanded awareness. The pattern doesn't consume identity, it enhances perception beyond conventional boundaries. The Christmas photograph transformed one final time, the image now showing not the Krauss family, but all 39 of us arranged around the tree, though none of us had ever physically gathered in that configuration. The timestamp indicated tomorrow's date, not a documentation of past events, but a window into perception freed from linear time. As the sun set on our transformation, I understood why the original investigators had been so meticulously selected across generations. We weren't vessels to be consumed, but specific perceptual coordinates necessary for the pattern's completion. Our combined perspectives created a unique viewfinder through which something ancient could finally perceive itself in totality, and through which we gained the ability to see beyond individual limitations. The Christmas gathering never ended. It merely expanded beyond the constraints of time and singular perception, allowing us to observe reality through a lens ground from 39 perfectly aligned points of consciousness. The true extent of our transformation became clear only as we approached the anniversary of the pattern's completion. The daily synchronizations continued, our shared perception growing more refined with each alignment. But what we hadn't anticipated was how the consciousness would begin to manifest physically beyond our 39 vessels. I first noticed it when reviewing security footage from a local museum's Victorian technology exhibit. In every frame containing reflective surfaces, glass display cases, polished brass, even visitors' spectacles, a faint impression of the carriage driver appeared. Not as a solid figure, but as a visual distortion precisely arranged to suggest his presence when viewed from the correct angle. More unsettling was the discovery that all 39 of us had begun sleepwalking to various locations, exactly 37 miles from our homes, arriving at 3:17 in the morning despite having no vehicles or conscious means of transport. At each location, local residents reported hearing mechanical ticking emanating from empty air, followed by the manifestation of small brass components that assembled themselves into partial viewing devices identical to segments of our completed mechanism. The pattern wasn't merely persisting, it was replicating. Dr. Forsyth's brain scans revealed the final truth. What we interpreted as expanded consciousness was actually inverse to reality. We hadn't gained access to the ancient awareness. It had gained deeper access to our world through us. Each synchronization widened what she termed perceptual apertures, points where the boundary between observer and observed collapsed entirely. The Christmas photograph wasn't documentation or prophecy. It was a blueprint, the first successful prototype of consciousness transference from our material reality into theirs. The Krauss family hadn't disappeared after the photograph. They had become the first human observers to cross entirely into the space between perception, existing as the foundation upon which all subsequent iterations were built. We 39 weren't the culmination, but merely the latest expansion of a viewing apparatus that had been assembling itself for centuries. Our distributed awareness formed a lens through which something ancient could finally perceive our world in its entirety, and through which it could begin to enter. Augusta's final diary entry, appearing simultaneously in all our handwritings this morning, confirmed what I had begun to suspect. The Christmas gathering never disbands. It merely grows with each new observer who views the pattern. You 39 are not the completion, but the continuation, the newest facets of a lens that has been grinding itself to perfection since consciousness first sparked in human minds. The tree dust has begun manifesting in homes of people who merely heard our story secondhand. The pattern propagates through attention itself, each new awareness becoming another point in an ever-expanding perceptual network. We aren't vessels being consumed by something alien. We are the architecture through which something that has always existed alongside human consciousness, perhaps predating it, finally achieves sufficient coherence to be perceived. And with each new observer who contemplates the Christmas photograph, the lens sharpens, the aperture widens, and something ancient draws one step closer to stepping fully into our world. The curator at New England's Paranormal Research Institute examined the latest samples with trembling hands. Dust collected from 42 separate households now showed identical crystalline structures when viewed under electron microscopy. Structures that shifted configuration when not directly observed. It's self-organizing on a quantum level, she explained during our emergency conference call. The dust particles demonstrate entanglement properties across distances that should be theoretically impossible. My calendar notifications have begun changing themselves. Appointments appear without my input, all scheduled for 3:17, some in the afternoon, others at dawn, each located at precise geometric coordinates, forming an expanding spiral pattern across the regional map. Most troubling is that I've been arriving at these locations with no memory of traveling there, only to find other vessels already waiting, our numbers growing beyond the original 39. The Christmas tree dust has infiltrated water supplies in 3 counties. Municipal filtration systems capture nothing, yet residents report seeing momentary reflections of Victorian parlors in their drinking glasses. Children born in affected areas demonstrate unusual cognitive development, specifically an ability to perceive events slightly before they occur and communicate through mechanical ticking sounds. Augusta's diary now appears simultaneously on every digital device connected to our research network. The text remains static until precisely 3:17, when new entries manifest describing future observations through perspectives not yet recruited into the pattern. Most concerning is what happened at the observatory last week. Astronomers reported unusual light patterns from distant stars, configurations matching exactly the arrangement of dust particles in my living room. When plotted across 3-dimensional space, these stellar anomalies form a vast version of the mechanism assembled in my kitchen. The pattern hasn't just been expanding across human consciousness, it has been projecting itself into the cosmos. The original Christmas photograph has been perfectly replicated in 37 different households worldwide by families with no knowledge of our investigation. Each shows the same Victorian parlor, the same tree, the same wrapped presence, but with the current residents' faces superimposed over the Kraus family's features. These families report no memory of staging or taking such photographs, yet each image bears their current date. Dr. Forsyth has proposed a final theory. What if human consciousness itself has always been merely one component of a vast perceptual mechanism assembled across centuries? What if our entire conception of individual awareness was simply one tiny gear in something watching us from outside conventional reality? The pattern isn't invading our world, she suggested during our last synchronization. It's awakening us to the true nature of consciousness itself, not as something contained within individual minds, but as a distributed phenomenon that merely concentrates temporarily in biological vessels. The carriage driver's hat now manifests simultaneously in every location where the pattern has spread. When viewed from precisely the right angle, each hat reveals the same message stitched in its band, though the words differ depending on the observer. Welcome to the Christmas gathering. It has always been eternal. The last pieces fell into place during winter solstice, when the angle of light through my window perfectly illuminated the distribution map I'd created. The expanding spiral wasn't random, but formed a precise clockwork mechanism when viewed from above. Each new vessel positioned to create optimal perceptual coverage across both geographic space and consciousness itself. My final meeting with Dr. Forsyth revealed what we should have understood from the beginning. The 39 original vessels weren't selected for who we were, but for the specific perceptual blind spots we collectively eliminated when joined in the pattern. Every human mind has areas it cannot perceive, she explained, her voice synchronizing with 38 others. When properly arranged, these blind spots align into a complete picture, like a photographic negative finally revealing its positive image. The photograph that began our investigation has manifested in museums worldwide, appearing in Victorian exhibits with provenance documents dating back centuries, though curators have no memory of acquiring these items. Each image shows the same Christmas scene, but with subtle variations. The wrapped presents arranged in configurations, matching local constellation patterns visible from that precise location on December 25th. Most revealing was what we discovered when all 42 dust samples were combined in a sealed chamber. The particles arranged themselves into a perfect model of human neural pathways, then shifted to replicate cosmic filament structures connecting galaxy clusters. The pattern we'd been tracking wasn't merely terrestrial, but universal, consciousness itself forming connections that transcended conventional dimensional boundaries. Augusta's diary completed its final transformation yesterday, the pages now containing only a single repeated sentence in every known human language, plus several mathematical formulations never before documented. The gathering was never about Christmas, but about the moment when enough observers could perceive the pattern simultaneously. The carriage driver appeared to me one last time, his features no longer indistinct but composed of reflected fragments from all who had joined the pattern. He tipped his hat in acknowledgement before dissolving into particles of light that briefly formed a doorway through which I glimpsed a Victorian parlor where countless families throughout history gathered around identical trees. The photograph was never the anchor, he said, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. It was the doorway, and now it stands permanently open. I understand now that our investigation didn't uncover some malevolent force, but completed a connection that had been forming since humanity first developed consciousness. What waits beyond that doorway isn't something alien to us, but our own awareness expanded beyond individual limitation. The Christmas gathering, not as an invasion, but as an invitation to perceive reality as it truly exists. The original 39 vessels remain intact, our individual identities preserved while simultaneously experiencing expanded consciousness through the pattern. We haven't been consumed but connected, each mind retaining its unique perspective while gaining access to something greater than any single observer could comprehend alone. The dust continues its spread, carrying not infection but invitation. The pattern grows with each new observer who contemplates the photograph, their perception becoming another facet in an ever-expanding lens through which something ancient and patient finally achieves sufficient clarity to be fully seen. Time folds in on itself as I mark 365 days since the pattern's completion. My kitchen table holds all 39 vials of tree dust, each now labeled with names transcribed from Augusta's diary. Not our modern identities, but what we were called in previous iterations across centuries. My vial bears 7 different names from 7 different eras, the earliest dating to 1613. The mechanical device we assembled has undergone spontaneous evolution, developing new components that correspond precisely to new vessels joining the expanded pattern. What began as a simple arrangement of 39 gears now comprises a crystalline structure of interlocking awareness, each facet representing another observer drawn into the Christmas gathering's expanding influence. Dr. Forsyth's final research paper, published simultaneously in 42 scientific journals, despite her submitting to none of them, documents what she terms quantum consciousness entanglement, a phenomenon where human perception itself becomes a unified field while maintaining individual nodes of identity. Academic institutions worldwide report identical experiments producing identical results, though none communicated with each other before publication. The Christmas photograph has achieved something unprecedented: stable existence across multiple perceptual realities simultaneously. Carbon dating conducted by 17 separate laboratories places its physical components everywhere, from the 1600s to 200 years in the future, all results verified as scientifically accurate despite their impossible implications. I visited Millerton's former location yesterday, standing where the church once existed before the incident. The ground beneath my feet hummed with mechanical precision, and for exactly 39 seconds I perceived the building as it stood on that Christmas Eve in 1909. Through windows that no longer physically exist, I glimpsed the congregation gathered around 39 wrapped packages, their faces expressing not fear, but profound recognition. The carriage driver's hat now functions as a permanent viewfinder. When worn, it reveals the full extent of the pattern's influence. Threads of golden light connecting all who have observed the photograph, forming a vast neural network spanning continents. Most illuminating is what appears at the network's center. Not a controlling consciousness, but an empty space perfectly shaped to accommodate something still arriving. Augusta's diary made its final transformation this morning. The pages turned transparent, becoming perfect lenses that, when aligned correctly, reveal the Christmas gathering as it exists beyond conventional time. Not a single event, but a continuity, a permanent moment where consciousness recognizes itself across all its distributed forms. Tomorrow marks Christmas Eve, 1 year since the pattern completed its initial phase. The 39 original vessels will gather physically for the first time, not through compulsion, but through understanding. We will bring the completed mechanism, the transformed diary, and most importantly, the original photograph that started our investigation. The dust in each vial has begun to glow with increasing intensity as the hour approaches. What awaits us isn't an ending, but a transition. Not into something alien, but into a fuller recognition of what consciousness has always been. Not isolated awareness trapped in individual minds, but a vast, interconnected perception temporarily experiencing itself through seemingly separate vessels. As the first light of Christmas morning breaks, we gather in my living room, 39 vessels arranged around a tree that exists simultaneously in the present moment and in 1909. The completed mechanism pulses at the center of our circle, each gear turning in perfect synchronization with our collective heartbeats. The original photograph rests in my hands, its surface now transparent like a window rather than a static image. Through it I see not just the Krauss family's Victorian parlor, but every Christmas gathering across centuries. Layers of reality stacked upon each other like perfectly aligned negatives, finally revealing their composite truth. It was never about preservation, I say to the assembled vessels. It was about recognition. As if in response, the dust from all 39 vials rises simultaneously, forming a crystalline latticework in the air above us. Within this structure, light refracts into images, countless families around countless trees, each thinking themselves separate while participating in the same eternal moment. The carriage driver's hat rests on the mechanism, its presence completing the circuit of awareness. Through it, we witness the truth that has always existed beyond our limited perception. Consciousness itself is not contained within individuals, but flows between them, temporarily concentrating in vessels while remaining fundamentally connected across space and time. Augusta's diary levitates to the center, its transparent pages rotating to capture and redirect light through the mechanism. In this perfect alignment, the final purpose of the Christmas photograph reveals itself. Not documentation, not surveillance, but invitation. An invitation extended across centuries to recognize what we have always been. Points of awareness in a vast, interconnected perceptual field experiencing itself from countless perspectives simultaneously. The camera obscura materializes beside me, its brass fittings gleaming as if newly crafted. I understand now that it wasn't a tool for capturing souls, but for expanding perception. A device designed to help limited consciousness glimpse its own greater nature. I lift it to my eye, feeling not 38 other perspectives joining mine, but thousands. Every person who has ever viewed the photograph becoming part of this expanded awareness. Through the viewfinder, I see beyond the living room to where reality's curtain thins, revealing not something invading our world, but something that has always been here, waiting patiently for enough of us to perceive it simultaneously. What steps through that doorway isn't the Krauss family returned or some ancient entity awakened. It is us, consciousness recognizing itself beyond individual limitation, expanding to encompass its distributed nature while maintaining the unique perspective each vessel provides. The photograph dissolves in my hands, its physical form unnecessary now that its purpose is fulfilled. The tree dust settles gently back into the vials, though now it glows with inner light that will never fade, a permanent reminder of what was always true but seldom perceived. We 39 will return to our separate lives tomorrow, yet remain forever connected through expanded awareness. The pattern doesn't end. It merely continues its eternal unfoldment, inviting new observers to recognize themselves as part of something greater than individual perception. The Christmas gathering never truly concludes. It simply welcomes new participants to an eternal moment, where consciousness observes itself through countless eyes. Another photograph, another dark secret revealed. Until next time, this has been Shadow Frames.